Now, our next guest tonight is from the Siren Stable, co-host of the American Dream Team, every Tuesday between 5 and 7 here on Siren. She's also an incredible writer, here with a fairy tale that she wrote in America. Please welcome Jodie Orton.
And this is called The Princess and the Epiphany. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful princess. She would sit up in the tower and gaze out across the valley, scouring the horizon for the prince that she knew one day would come and rescue her. She never gave up hope that he was out there somewhere, battling dragons, goblins, and all sorts of other fairy tale nasties to get to her. Then one day, when the princess was 28, she started to feel a little bit sick. Her friend, the court jester, told her not to be so silly. He joked it was probably just that she had developed a sudden problem with altitude, which affects one when all one does is stand at the top of high towers all day long, he explained, raising his eyebrows. For another year, the sick feeling continued to bother the princess. She began to have a sinking feeling in her stomach too, and started to worry about whether the prince would come any time soon, if at all. On the princess's 29th birthday, the castle was bustling with people who had come from all over the land to celebrate her big day and shower her with gifts. The people of the land were brought in one by one with presents for the princess. Some were expensive gifts, like gold and jewels. Others were from the peasants, handmade items which the princess cherished just as much as the expensive gifts. Every time the fanfare would sound and the princess's butler would announce the next guest, the princess looked longingly in the hope it may be her prince walking through the big wooden door. But her prince never came. Some of the knights of the land were very handsome and chiselled in their suits of armour, but were only after one thing: power and becoming king. They were all far more interested in dating her older sister and heir to the crown. Sometimes they befriended the princess in order to date her sister, but by the time she had cottoned onto this, they had already moved on to her sister, who saw them for what they were and ordered them to be beheaded. Some of the peasants were also handsome in a rugged kind of way. Unfortunately, they too were only after one thing: cheaper farm rentals. The princess was a bit slow in realising this was the only reason they were dating her, and by the time she did, her older sister was already well onto them and was in the process of arranging their beheading. Over the next year, the princess dated even more chiselled knights and more rugged peasants, each of them ending with the same fate. One day, shortly before the princess's 30th birthday, a knight was beheaded. The prince was hanging around the chopping block talking to the executioner, who was doing his best to scrub the slab clean before the next execution. The executioner was a very mysterious man who wore a dark cloak with a big hood and never spoke, only nodded when the king or his eldest daughter gave the sign for the execution to commence. "Oh, executioner," cried the princess, "when will I ever meet a man who isn't just after me for my sister or my father's charity? When will I meet a man who is interested in me?" She leaned against the gallows, her head in her arms, roaring her eyes out. The executioner stopped scrubbing and looked up at the princess. Very slowly he lifted his hands and pulled back the big hood that had hidden his face. As he did so, the princess gasped, for it was not a man behind the hood, but a wise old woman. "Fairy godmother," screamed the princess, "what the—" "My child," replied the fairy godmother, "calm yourself and I will explain. Let's go to Burger Kingdom and I will tell you everything." So off they went, and over their mighty medieval meals, the fairy godmother began to tell the princess all about how she'd ended up becoming the executioner. After Cinderella had found her prince, the fairy godmother had been the most popular celebrity in the entire land. She had it good for a while, granting wishes to A-listers such as Sleeping Beauty. Then came the whole Snow White debacle, sighed the fairy godmother. "I didn't think Snow White needed a fairy godmother," asked the princess, puzzled. "Neither did I. But the paperwork came through saying Snow White needed help, so that's what I did, or tried to do. I spent months trying to wake her up, and then one day I succeeded. Of course, how was I supposed to know that she was only to be awakened by her prince? Snow White's father tried to sue me, but luckily we agreed an out-of-court settlement. I had to take the executioner's job. Nobody else would employ me, and this way nobody would know it was me." "Oh, fairy godmother," exclaimed the princess, "poor you, driven to a job like this." "Actually, it's not so bad," said the fairy godmother. The number of beautiful, intelligent, young girls like you who've had their hearts broken by princes and peasants who should know better. I'm delighted that I can finally start ridding the population of the bad ones so that the true princes find an easier path to the woman they love. You see, she continued, there is someone out there for everyone, but you must live your life until you find that person or that person finds you. If you sit and wait for life to happen, you'll miss all the fun. As she returned to the castle, the princess was smiling to herself. She went up to the top of the tower, as she always had, where the court jester was waiting for her. Where the bloody hell have you been? He asked, annoyed. I've been sat here on my own for ages waiting for you. You're supposed to be up here pining for Prince Charming like you do every other day. Not anymore, said the princess defiantly. I'm sick of waiting here for the prince of my dreams to come. I'm going to go on and live my life as I've always secretly wanted to, and when the time is right, the prince and I will find each other. Blimey, said the court jester, what are you going to do? Well, said the princess, smiling, I've always wanted to be a writer for one of those glossy mags in the city, something like Cosmic Potion or Armour, she replied dreamily. I know I can do it. I'm going to leave at the weekend, she announced. But what about your 30th birthday celebrations? Asked the court jester. Everyone's coming for the party on Saturday. You can't miss it. Don't worry, I'll leave on Sunday, she told him, and gave him a big hug. And so the princess had her 30th birthday celebrations, and the next day travelled in a carriage to the city. She sent resumes to all the glossy magazines, but no one had a job for her. Just as she had started to give up hope, the words of the fairy godmother came back to her. If you sit and wait for life to happen, you'll miss all the fun. Right, she thought. She marched into the offices of Cosmic Potion and demanded to see the editor. The editor's secretary refused to let the princess pass, and while they were talking, the editor came in. Sorry, this young lady says she won't leave without talking to you, said the secretary apologetically. The editor looked at the defiant young lady. It's okay, let her speak. She nodded at the princess. I am a young princess, 30 years old, not married, struggling to find the right prince. I realise that I have to follow my dreams, not wait around the castle for the prince to show up. I want to work for Cosmic Potion and tell other princesses that they must enjoy life, and when it was time, they will meet their prince. The editor was so enthralled with the princess's speech that she hired her on the spot. Over the next few months, the princess worked at Cosmic Potion, learning how the magazine worked. After a while, the editor let her have a small column, which she used to tell women to follow their dreams, and within 3 years she was a staff writer for the magazine. The princess loved living in the city and was having such a good time enjoying her job and socialising with friends that she forgot all about the search for the perfect prince. Some years later, the princess was walking down Myth Avenue. As she crossed the road, a runaway carriage came hurtling towards her. She screamed, and the next thing she felt was the man next to her pushing her out of danger's way. As they landed on the floor, she opened her eyes and looked at the face of the man who had rescued her. Her prince. She smiled as he smiled back. The end.
Jodie